Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. Some interesting stuff happening right now. If you've been watching what's happening on Twitter or X, of course, when Elon Musk first took it over, he was promising essentially a platform that respects free speech. They came out with a new line. That new line is freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. In other words, you can speak, but people might not be able to hear you speak, is the new thing. You could argue that muzzles work similar to that. If someone puts a muzzle over your face and you're not able to be heard, of course you can still speak. You can hear yourself speaking, but maybe nobody's going to hear you. It reminds me as well of what was done during the Soviet Union. During the time of the Soviet Union, of course, when it came to religious freedom, people said, "Hey, you're allowed to have your religion. You can have your belief, but keep it inside your own home. Don't let other people hear you express your faith." It's very, I mean, of course, he's not restricting religion as far as I've seen, but it's very similar to that. A lot of this comes in after he brought in this new CEO, Yacarino, and she just seems like she's a pro censorship kind of deep state-ish aligned individual. But here we are. The big thing, though, is that part of the censorship programs they're rolling out, they claim it's a temporary thing specifically around elections. And that has people questioning, well, what is this censorship program for elections? Were y'all forced to do it? Is this some kind of government program you're not telling us about? Why do you have a special censorship program just for the elections? Let me show you briefly. It says here, Twitter X says supporting people's rights to accurate and safe political discourse on Twitter. Now, you can have, of course, the right to free speech, but it says supporting people's right to accurate and safe political discourse. Since when do you have a right to accurate discourse? If you have two kids and they're arguing with each other, I guarantee each side believes that they're the accurate one. How do you determine which side is accurate? You got to hear them out. You got to let them hash it out. The basis of free speech was in the marketplace of ideas, not a right to accuracy. How do you say a person reading the news has a right to accuracy? Of course, the news as an industry, as a business, would have it in their interest to provide accurate information, because if people stop believing the information is accurate, people might stop reading. You at least need to take steps to ensure credibility and accuracy. But since when do people have a right to accuracy? And of course, the bigger question is accurate according to whom? Who decides what is accurate? Who decides what is inaccurate? I can tell you already, Twitter has censored us again since Elon Musk took over. They actually censored one of our documentaries just recently. And I would say that's 100% accurate. There's nothing in it that could be deemed, I think, false. And so obviously they're censoring for some other reason. Regardless, they say they also have safe political discourse. What is safe political discourse? Is it safe political discourse, for example, if you have, Democrats throwing Molotov cocktails and so on? Is it safe political discourse if a Proud Boy, shakes a metal fence and gets 17 years in prison for it, which just happened, by the way? Is it safe when you have people protesting across the street from the White House and one of them throws a Molotov cocktail in a historical church and sets herself on fire, notably when Trump was president? Do you all remember that? And nothing happened to them. What about when you have these two individuals torch a police car? Or, for example, when you had the Chaz site, the CHOP site, whatever they want to call it, the temporary autonomous zone, actual insurrection, take over parts of Seattle? And did anybody go to prison for that actual insurrection? Was that actual insurrection where they declared themselves a separate country, and then actually carried out acts of forcing businesses to pay them for protection money? Did anybody go to prison for that? Is that safe political discourse? Or is it only safe political discourse if someone says they're offended by what somebody else says? Because that's what it sounds like. Regardless, it says this. During elections, X works to get in front of a range of tactics that people use to target the process. To do this, we hire the right people, update our policies, and evolve our product. Now, what are these tactics that people use to get ahead, to target the process, and they have to, kind of get ahead of this? They're not really being clear on what the heck they're talking about. They're suggesting that people use certain tactics to target the process, we assume, of, basically spreading information. I don't know what this is. Is the process like reporting and, going on the ground interviewing people? You have one of the big journalists in Maui just got censored on Twitter, by the way. One of the journalists on the ground reporting in Maui got censored by Twitter. Is that the process, going on the ground to sites where information is happening and, recording yourself and interviewing people? Is that the process they have to get ahead of? It's not clear. They say this, though. Our policies. We have rules in place to help protect the safety and authenticity. Yeah, authenticity and safety of conversations on X. Yeah. Again, how do you determine what is safe or unsafe information? How do you determine what is authentic or inauthentic information? If they're talking again about censoring people on extreme things like making terrorist threats, hey, fine, censor them. If they're talking about censoring people because you make somebody feel unsafe, which is everything these days, then no. And how do you talk about the authenticity? If they're talking about AI or false information or bots, fine, censor all of them. But if you're talking about trying to fact check people using one-sided biased fact checkers, which happens a lot, then no. I will say the community notes on Twitter, though, does tend to be decent, at least. And so if they're going by that, good. But I can say already they have I've seen censorship on things that absolutely should not have been censored. Censorship of accurate information, censorship of actual news reporting, censorship of investigative journalism, and they're on a bad track with that so far. Regardless, it says during the elections, this is the big part, our civic integrity policy provides an extra layer of protection that is applied for a limited period of time before and during an election. So they have a special election censorship program. Maybe you can't talk about election fraud or something, because that's what they're doing everywhere else. We're updating this policy to make sure we strike the right balance between tackling the most harmful types of content, those that could intimidate or deceive people into surrendering their right to participate in a civic process, and not censoring political debate. If they want to make sure that nobody is intimidating or deceiving people into surrendering their right to participate in a civic process. The people trying to get Trump removed from ballots, i.e. the secretaries of state, they should all be censored. Are they not trying to refuse people their civic rights? If people want to, for example, vote for Donald Trump and they want to remove him from the ballot so he can't vote, is that not interference with a person's basic civic rights? Should that be then censored if people advocate for the removal of him using the 14th Amendment? I think so. What about, using the legal system to attack and undermine a political campaign? Is that depriving people of their civic right, making sure that an elected candidate, one of the main candidates, cannot properly tour around and hold events and campaign? I'd say that's interference with civic rights. What do they consider to fall under this in this case? You know what I mean? And will this stay in place? I really wonder if Donald Trump comes back into office. Are the Democrats in that case all just going to throw their hands up and be like, we're not going to question the election. This was people's choice. This is democracy. We all respect democracy. Could you imagine that? Imagine, all right, suspend disbelief, 2024, votes are in, Donald Trump is the winner of the elections, I guess 2025. He's inaugurated January 6th, and the Democrats are just on the sidelines applauding. Yay, congratulations on winning a totally legitimate election. No challenges. We're not going to question it whatsoever. Rise, Mr. President. Also, we're not going to question your presidency or your legitimacy or your character, because only a domestic terrorist would do such a thing. Do you think they're going to do that? No, I would be shocked to the core if I saw that. They're going to flip the narrative and they're going to do the same thing they've done every single time, which is carry out the same acts and same narratives that they've ironically tried to incriminate others of doing. Questioning the elections and probably carrying out mass protests and acts of violence under the name of defending democracy or something like that. They're going to do the exact same thing that they're throwing other people in prison for, because that's what they've done every single time, frankly. And when that happens, inevitably, I wonder really if these big tech platforms, if Twitter, if Facebook, if these big, Google and so on, I wonder if they'll continue censoring people once that happens. I seriously do wonder. It says, though, the policy will also be aligned with our updated enforcement philosophy: freedom of speech, not reach. Yeah, throwing a muzzle on people's face, telling them they can only be heard within the confines of their own home, that's not freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is public speech. Freedom of speech is the ability to be heard. If you are speaking and nobody hears you, are you engaging? Are you still, exercising your First Amendment right? If you have the right to say whatever you want, but nobody can hear what you say, is that a violation of your First Amendment rights? Of course, they would argue they're a private company. They don't have to respect the Constitution. But if they're talking about freedom of speech, they're referencing that right. If they're talking about freedom of speech, they're referencing that constitutional protected right. If you deprive a person of their right to be heard, are you still protecting the right to free speech? No, you are not. And this is, again, this new CEO they brought in. They say, we will add publicly visible labels to posts identified as possibly violating the civic integrity policy, letting people know when their reach has been restricted. Now, I would seriously also, I really do hope that if they do roll this out, that it's not one-sided, that people on both sides of the political aisle are held equally to these standards, that if people are spreading, quote-unquote disinformation, then both sides are held to fact checkers, and that community notes, if deemed accurate, will censor people, whether Republican or Democrat or whatever the heck they may be. I do hope it's like that. Otherwise, this is just another chapter of politicized censorship. And I do think there needs to be investigations on whether the government is involved with this yet again, because they were previously. That being said, the entire Trump-Russia thing was disinformation. Every news outlet, every flapping talking head, every intelligence agency, every elected official that talked about Trump colluding with Russia was spreading disinformation. Should all of them be retroactively, censored because of that? Because then they've now been deemed to have been in violation of public trust, and they're habitual liars who cannot be trusted. Maybe they should. Did they not mislead people during 3 key elections, notably in 2016, 2018, and in 2020? When notably in 2020, they again used the whole Trump-Russia thing as a way to label the Hunter Biden laptop as Russian disinformation, and of course have that story removed. Should not everybody who engaged in that be deemed a spreader of disinformation and somebody who engaged in election interference, if this is the standard? Maybe they should. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, if they want to have one set of standards, why not enforce it on both sides of the aisle? If they want to have a set of standards, why not ensure that it's not politicized, that it's not biased? If they want to do this, then do it in a way that is responsible and in a way that respects people and upholds truth rather than upholds one political party over another, which is the big concern here. Let me show you one more thing, then we'll go and jump over to Epoch TV, and then I'll talk to you about what's happening with the 14th Amendment. They say this. This is their policy deeper on it. Freedom of speech, not reach. An update on our enforcement philosophy. They say further in, these beliefs are the foundation of freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. And by the way, that's an inherently self-contradictory statement. Freedom of speech, not reach. Now, you tell people, yeah, you can speak, but whisper. You can speak, but make sure nobody hears you speaking. Yeah, say whatever you want, but keep it to yourself, buddy. You know, is that telling someone they have freedom of speech? No, it's not. This is a sickening, just perversion of free speech under the label of free speech. This is a sickening perversion of the very concept of free speech. If you're telling people they can speak but not be heard. They say our enforcement philosophy, which means, when appropriate, restricting the reach of tweets that violate our process by making the content less discoverable. What they used to call shadow banning. They're bringing back shadow banning. Anyways, Twitter, okay, I mean, stepping back, they have allowed some pretty, spicy stuff on there. Trump came back on Twitter. He had a bunch of videos even claiming, for example, that, the bringing back of the COVID, narratives actually is a form of election interference. They allowed that to spread. They allowed that to stay there. They have had Tucker Carlson's videos. They have Tucker Carlson making some pretty far out stuff suggesting they might assassinate Donald Trump, suggesting that, the media were not covering Barack Obama's campaign when evidence had emerged that he was engaging in homosexual activity and was smoking crack. They allowed those videos to stay on Twitter. And so, I don't want to suggest that they're taking this too far yet, but things like this do concern me. And I will say, and this is a personal note, so you can deem me offended, right? I guess they censored us. I believe it was our vaccine injury documentary. I'm pretty sure that was the one. We had advertisements and they banned it. And so, I don't trust them at this point. You might notice I've been very little engaged on social media. This is one of the reasons. Of course, I have a team that, through Epoch Times, they do a lot of our promotions and stuff. But me, myself, I'm not really that engaged on social media. It's because I don't trust their integrity. I don't think it's a good investment of my time to build up my, following on platforms that have in the past and very frequently do censor me. You know what I mean? It's very unfortunate. At the same time, though, I do believe Elon Musk actually does believe in free speech. At the same time, too, I hope that if things get too far, that he reels it back in. I would argue it's already very close to the line of being too far. And, we'll see where it goes from here. That said, speaking of censorship, those of you on YouTube, by the way, we couldn't even air yesterday's episode on YouTube. If you're wondering where we were yesterday, we could not show you yesterday's episode because we talked about things that YouTube just bans. Case in point, 25 cents a week. Come join us on Epoch TV. Speaking of things will get us banned, let me show you a trailer of the special feature we put on Jan 6. All the more important because they just censored a guy for shaking a fence for 17 years in prison. Come join us on Epoch TV. Let me show this trailer. We'll jump over now. What was the process of actually putting this all together?
Many hours of finding the right camera angles and watching it. The first trouble started just after 1 o'clock.
45 pages, here it is right here. Donald Trump has been indicted.
Somber day for the country.
This all happened before President Trump's speech was over.
The founder of the Oath Keepers militia group is headed to prison for more than 18 years.
His lawyers didn't have this video. The video we're watching right now, his own lawyers did not have. There was a big question of what did the people do who actually did enter the building.
This is where we picked it up with the security footage that is new. At this point, the story dramatically changes.
The New Jersey man who assaulted a Capitol police officer on January 6th has been sentenced.
So this was withheld.
This was not shown to the defense.
That could be considered exculpatory evidence. This doesn't seem like what a lot of the media is showing.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is. What we're after is the truth.